Hello everyone. I hope you all are doing well today and welcome back to yet another episode of the Weekend Club series. Before we start today's video, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and also the link to my e-learning courses on fundamentals of project management and fundamentals of business communication, which is out there on Udemy, are mentioned in the description box below. So please do check it out. And today's conversation is going to be around project management, one of my favorite subjects. And it's going to be a very basic discussion around project management. So this will be very insightful for the beginners or aspirants of project management who wants to understand very basics of project management. So without much of saying, let's get started. So Rahul and Gaurav, today's conversation is going to be around project management. My very first question to you both is like very basic, that what is project management for you in your perception, or in general, what is project management in your opinion?
I think project management is where there is a change, probably a significant change, and then we treat those changes as project, in my opinion. And basically, project management is a way, a channel to better manage that change, at least initially, in its initial phase.
Yeah, for me, I think also similar in line to what Rahul said, where I think it's like when you're pursuing a goal and then you try to break it down into smaller steps, and then now those steps might involve things, processes, or people, and then now planning those steps, including all of these variables, is what would be considered project management.
Okay, but how is project management different from managing your daily work tasks or managing people?
I think probably the difference with project management is project management, in my opinion, comes into play when there is not a set system. So there is difference between daily operations, which cannot be treated as project management as per my understanding. So basically, where we do not have our set systems in place, which is not considered as our daily operations, then we treat it as a project management. For example, cooking a food is not a project management, but probably cooking a food for 100 people, which is not daily operations for a human, can be treated as project management. So yeah, and if you are not cooking a food at all, then it also can be a project management.
Yeah, I think I was, before Rahul answered, I was a bit I was trying to think of how I would define it, but I think Rahul put it very well about like this thing where if it involves change and progression, then it has to be part of project management. But if it is something that you have to do repetitively in a monotonous way, that shouldn't be or cannot be counted into project management, I guess. And yeah, I think I would also think so. Yeah.
All right. No, I agree with what both of you said, and project management is something that I really love as a subject, as something to implement, because I've done my master's in project management, so it's something very interesting subject for me. So what both of you said, I can summarize that project is something which is not an ongoing process. It has a start date and it has an end date, basically a start time and an end time. So basically what Rahul said is if a family member is cooking every single day is not a project, but if we are hosting a party, a gathering, and it's an event and we have to manage that event, that is a project, because that event has a start date and an end date. For example, wedding is a sort of a project. Same way, if you are launching a product and if you are creating and planning a campaign around it, even executing that campaign before the launch of the product, and you have a set date for launching the product, until then you have to implement that campaign, that is a project. So my next question to both of you with that is, why do you think project is such a crucial part of today's fast changing world, especially I'm talking about our workplaces?
I think it's very in the work environment that I'm in. Of course, we work on a single large project, right? And therefore, it has to have a end date or a timeline which we have to follow through. And then, of course, there are even smaller packages that you need to think about when you're working with other people in terms of collaborations or with students and so on. And I think that becomes really important because also at the end in this 3 4 5 years of timeline, you're always doing something new all the time in some or the other aspect. It might be the same device that you're working on, but then you might have some different protocols that you want to follow, or you want to sometimes develop a new protocol, or the other part of the projects are much more newer, at least to you, and then those really do require a good sense of or good planning in terms of how the project execution needs to be done.
Right.
So I think it becomes really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think probably like if we hear like everyone saying, okay, the world is changing more and more day by day, the rate of change is higher. So probably then it needs more projects to be initiated. For example, like tariffs, which are the current issues. Probably many of the companies might be addressing that issue with tariff initially with project management. Uh, Also, I feel that uh, the requirement of growth, the rate of growth, everyone wants very quicker growth rates, and that might also lead to more projects being initiated, and also of course the technological changes, which is changing of IT systems like ERP or financial systems, which is a big chunk of project management, I would say. And on industrial front, probably like commissioning of machines also are considered under project management. So yeah.
No, I absolutely agree with both what both of you just mentioned, and I believe that we are living in a world of projects, because everything that we see around us is in a way that we are operating as a part of project, be it a campaign, be it any well-being initiatives in a company, be it a training and development plan that is being implemented for 2 or 3 months in an organization for specific employees. Everything is a part of a project because it has a start date and it has an end date. Having said that, Gaurav, you mentioned about, and as such, I mean, you are doing PhD, and PhD in itself is a project, because you have an end date. You need to complete your research and submit your thesis in a specific tenure of time. You have an end date. You have that specific year, that timeline that you need to complete your project. How do you plan your research and your project? I mean, how do you plan that? By what time, what month, or what duration you need to complete your testing of whatever you are researching right now? Or how are you doing your literature review? How are you writing your thesis and managing to maintain all those timelines? So how do you plan on those things? Do you have a specific format, or do you use any tool that helps you to keep up with the timelines in your project in a PhD?
So it's very. I think it really also depends a lot on the topic and so on, and also of course on the person you are. Like for me, I'm not so formally using very good tools in such that I can really plan everything in the long term. I have kind of a outlook in my brain that, oh, this is the timeline that I need to follow for certain, like for achieving certain or finishing certain project experiments and so on. But generally, the PhD timeline, at least in Europe, it goes around 3 to 4 years, right? It can go up to 5, but in general, it's 4 years or so. And then it is like, if you're a first generation PhD like I am, or I was, then it's like you also kind of have a project definition, but then you still need to work a bit more into what you really want to do. So you kind of have a free hand which you then discuss with the professor, or if you have a postdoc or a group leader who you're working under or with, and then you kind of streamline and smooth out all of these edges. So the first few months is really just into this, including orientation into the lab, into, for example, if you're, I don't know, working in a setup like mine where you have one particular device that you really will be focusing on, getting trained on it, all the things that you would need to learn, and then also the literature review part, because this defining the project and the hypothesis and the goal goes hand in hand with the literature review, right? So you kind of do it in this first few months. And once that is done, then you kind of start plotting out your long-term plan about, okay, these are the first set of experiments. These are, like, let's say 4 things that I could try out to see if they work or not. And based on how the results come up, I might end up going in a certain direction. And then, even though now you still keep a general goal or a direction in mind that, okay, this is what we want to achieve at the end, of course, but a lot of times you have failed experiments, a lot of times you have feasibility issues in certain things, and so it can change a lot. So, like, you really can, a lot of times you have situations where, okay, you work on something for 1.5, 2 years trying to optimize a process, and then you're like, okay, it does not work, now you have to revamp everything and then, like, think from that point on. And so these things always happen. But yeah, personally for me, it's also that I do not have very like a really good theoretical model in which I could plot out my project planning or my thought as such. So yeah.
How about you, Rahul?
Yeah, I mean, in industries, it's a little bit different with project planning, I would say. Uh, if I if I think from industrial perspective, in my limited work experience, probably, of course, the definition of the project, why we are initiating the project, is very important. What we want to achieve with it. Of course, there are timelines should be there. But in my opinion, since I like working with data, and I think also it is quite important to define some set of measures, not at the beginning probably, but as it is little bit in matured state, how we would be measuring the progress of the project, if it is working or not, and trying to follow up on that. Of course, defining timeline, documenting everything, because eventually the project in industrial cases, many of the project, not all, will be actually transferred to operational activities, for example commissioning of machine or something. That means documentation is very important. And I also believe like the timeline is also important, but to have a healthy view around it, rather than having a culture about pointing fingers that, okay, this person is responsible and he or she didn't do it. Rather, actually, as a team, if everyone is focused and passionate about chasing that target, what we are measuring, and trying to improve it, that can be a little bit gamifying the thing, and can also be fun at the end, that, okay, now we need to try to meet the timeline actually.
When it comes to project planning, any kind of project planning, there's something called work breakdown structure, wherein you break down all the tasks or all the work that is required as a part of your job to implement that project. So in planning stage, that there can be n number of things: planning a budget, or planning resources, planning vendors, and a lot of things. In that, there are a lot of phases that you can divide into. If you are implementing a project, or if you are starting a project, what is required in the initiation stage? For example, you need to define what is the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats of the project that I'm going to start. Every startup company is also a project, even though they do not have any end date. They are here to survive, but in a way, to thrive that success, initially they should address it as a project before entering to the market. So, doing that background research, initiating, understanding who benefits from this project, who benefits from the product that I'm going to sell, who benefits from the service that I'm going to sell. Another thing is, in a project, like there are stages. You need to define what comes under initiation, what comes under planning, what comes under execution, what comes under monitoring and control. Once you started executing and implementing that project, how are you going to track the progress, project update, how are you going to monitor and control all the personas or resources that are involved in the project, and at the end closure, because every project has an end date. So to understand what went wrong, what went right, how can we improve more in the next project, all of those things comes under project management. So once you create that breakdown structure, from that work breakdown structure you can create a Gantt chart. I'm sure both of you must have created some form of Gantt chart in your workspace, and I'm sure Gaurav has 100% done it. So Gantt chart is basically, you can do it in Excel, Microsoft Excel or Google Sheet as well, and that also can be implemented through different softwares that are there today of project management. And you can set timelines that, okay, from this to this I'm going to complete this task 1, from this month to this month I'm going to complete task 2. You can also understand, are any of the tasks interdependent on each other, or are they independent? If they are independent, then that means you need to complete one task so that the other task can only be initiated once task A is closed and done. So what Gaurav you mentioned is, sometimes there are experiments that doesn't work or doesn't go the way you have maybe expected or planned, and then you need to change. Now in project management there are two types of, in terms of change management. One is a project that works with waterfall method. Waterfall method is basically, in construction we can't paint things. We can't paint the walls until the bricks are done. You can't do the electricity part until the basic base or concrete walls are already there. So you need to freeze one task so that the other task can be initiated. So it depends on the industry and project. There's another method called agile method. That means you can keep on changing things and you can still work on it, go back to task A and still change that. It happens sometimes in software launches, like some kind of MIS or ERP or DevOps or some kind of software that someone is implementing. The very first page dashboard, the founder will say, I want to change this thing. Even though 80% work is done, they can still go back to that task and change, make some minor changes, while the other things are still stagnant the way it is. So that is agile method, that in any step of the project you can still go back to task 1 or task 2 and keep on changing things. So that's a difference, like waterfall and agile. So now my next question to you is, in both of your respective work that you both are doing, Gaurav is doing PhD and Rahul is in industry, how do you apply those principles of change management in your workspace? Like,
That was really interesting because like when as I was saying, right, like you have to kind of go through these feedback loops from different sequence of experiments to kind of keep improving. And then I think that sounds more like the agile form of change management, where you have this, in a way, a non-linear progression, right? Where you can always come back to step 3, even if you're on step 5, to improve step 6 and so on. And then I think, at least in my project, it's a lot of that, because let's say my kind of the process or the line timeline goes always designing, then fabrication, then cell experiments, imaging, and analysis. And now in any step if there's issues, I then go back to the previous steps to figure out how I can improve it. And there's again like this agile method where there's multiple solutions, so you can always tune any which is more comfortable. But I think at the end, the ideal would still be having this solid concrete waterfall method where you fix one step, because also when you're doing like any kind of scientific experiments, right, it is really important how you choose your variables, because you want to have this unbiased studies, right, when you do statistical analysis and so on. And in that case, you really want your previous steps. So if I'm doing fabrications, step has to be normalized before I go to the next one, right? And so even though while I'm working things out, agile method really helps out, because then I don't have to rely on one thing after the other. But once, if I really have to get to the end goal, it is really important that I fix the previous step.
Yeah, I think, like, for example, my daily role is more, we can consider it under routines and processes. But if I look at various projects happening across the organization, it, I feel, depends a lot about who is managing the project and what is their way of approaching the things. But in general, so I'm not, first of all, expert in this, and also I have about now little bit more than 2.5 years of work experience. But what I have observed is usually that projects are actually more based on concreting the steps, and operations seems to tend to be more agile, or that's the eventual goal which people are chasing. I feel that let's fix be project in, like, let's fix a step 1 first properly and then take it as a base and come to step 2 and then step 3. But when it comes to when the project is delivered or a daily routine or things, then our system needs to be agile in the daily operations, but probably project needs to be more yeah, succession wise, I would say. But of course it depends upon the nature of the project, but as per my observation.
And when it comes to any sort of project management, do your workspace follow any sort of scrum, meaning you have a scrum master who is like a captain of the sports team, who is there to motivate you, who is also there to give you the right feedback, who is there to coach you, who is there to take weekly, daily, or monthly sprints meaning follow-ups from you? What is the project update, what is the progress, all of those things. So do you follow any sort of similar kind of a structure, that you have a coach kind of a person who is known as a scrum master and who is there to motivate you, guide you, as well as give you the right constructive feedback when things don't go well as planned?
Yeah, in case of industries, we almost always have one person like that assigned to the project, I would say.
I think in academia in general, it really, again, like it goes down to how the professor structures the group. So in our case, you of course always have the professor, right? But then the professors, they're not always, they have other things because they're managers, so they also have to deal with money acquisition, project proposal writing, and a lot of other tasks, not just handling PhDs, right, or students. And then in that case, you always have like kind of a hierarchical structure where you have professors, but then you also have more experienced researchers like group leaders or senior scientists or postdocs, who, because they've already been through this journey, you can have these people who are very, like, one day they've gone through the process, so they understand what you're going through. Second, if they're closely related to or coming from the background of what you're working on right now, then they can also be the people who can like communicate on a weekly, daily basis to get feedback and then improve on everything, and even project planning, of course.
Now, I want to ask you a reverse question to both of you. What, in your ideology or perception, in your opinion, is a very poor project management?
Yeah, I mean, i- in my personal experience, I would say, not from probably organizational point of view here, I think we need to understand how much resource we are allocating to the project, which is important. If we have a false assumption, that can lead to catastrophe. Also, the goal of the project, of course, what we actually want from the project needs to be very clearly defined. Uh, the constraints, so for example, resource can be one of our constraints. So trying to balance that what resource we are allocating to the project and what we want needs to be taken into account in some form of balance, because both of things are constrained. If we want something really so much but we don't have resource, so defining the constraints are also very important, and at last also the impact, once the project is being executed actually on ground reality, what will be the impact of it, needs to be simulated or well thought through somehow.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rahul that I think these variables really need to be taken into account. If those are misjudged, you can always just go wrong. And I think just one or two points that I'd like to add is also one of the variables that would also play a part is people and personalities. Just how how equally important it is to have this understanding of the resource pool that you have. I think the resource in terms of the people that you have and the personalities and so on, I think managing them, because most of us end up working in a very collaborative environment, right? Either it's in teams or even when you're doing projects, you still end up having to rely on others. And in that case, just understanding and setting your expectations right really helps the project smoothen out. And of course, like as Rahul already mentioned, the most important is again like goal setting, that the goal is realistic or not. And also this, and I think this is not relevant to industry because that's very like kind of application or product driven. So you really are like, there's a lot of risk assessment done before, right? But in academia, because it's more curiosity driven, risk assessment that is done is slightly less, because it's just like you want to find out what happens. And then so I think one is also, which is really specific to academia, is like goal, not goal adjustment, but like to play the cards that you're dealt with in the best way possible, right? Like, because you start with this very idealistic goal setting, but then when you're dealt a shitty hand, you have to adjust your expectations accordingly and then just work around to get the best out of what you have now, instead of just trying to achieve the same thing and then having a really big mismatch.
So when it's about project management, I'm telling just a baseline fundamental theory. Now, I am a very firm believer of that what is already written in the books, not necessary that everyone needs to follow it. We can build up our own principles, we can build up our own theories related to project management, and that's how we can evolve and innovate in any subject in this on this planet. So but when it comes to textbooks, they have defined that there are three major variables when it comes to project management, which is scope, time and cost, and at large deliverables. So one, if your scope is well defined, that will also give you a clarity of the level of resources that you will need, including the human resource. If your scope is defined well, you will understand the timelines. Now once, and then you will at large also understand the cost, the budget of the project, and then the output, the deliverables. But if the scope is not well defined, or maybe if even if the scope is well defined, if you push ahead your timelines, if you are not able to deliver the project on time and you are keeping on pushing the timelines, it will definitely affect the cost of the project. because the prices will vary. It will keep on changing. It will fluctuate, especially if you are trying to implement a project on a global scale with different currencies involved in it in different respective countries. So the timeline managing, defining the correct scope in a very realistic way, understanding the time, understanding the cost involved in it, and at large the deliverables that you are going to commit is very, very, very important in project management. Now, I can give you a very simplistic example. If I am going to buy a furniture, let's say a dining table, uh, from a store, and I'm getting it customized, and I'm saying that I'm going to shift to my new house on this date, how soon can you deliver it? Now, if that furniture shop, that the person who is going to make my dining table says I can give you in this specific date, you will have to manage without a dining table in your new home only for a week. By the end of the week, your new dining table will be delivered at your home, and I'm very excited, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll wait. And then it keeps on dealing, and I get it after 3 months. And if there is no clarity of what kind of dining table that the maker is going to customize for me, if it's not, I'm not clear, if it's not well communicated that what materials are going to be used, what kind of wood is it going to be used, I am not even clear about the cost. Forget about the timelines. uh, I'm just aware of the deliverable that I'm going to get the dining table, but what kind of dining table? What are the resources? How many people are going to be involved to make my dining table? What will be the shape? What will be the length, width of it? What is the material? How expensive is that material? If it's not communicated properly, it is going to affect my project. That I'm expecting as a result if I'm the customer. So I just said this very basic example that applies to even large scale projects. If the scope, timeline, including the resources involved, everything is not communicated properly, it really, really, really affects the project.
I think I just got a thought on the basis of what you were sharing. I think if a couple is planning a marriage and if they are not taking decision soon enough where to get married, when to get married, then the cost of the rents for organizing the event goes so high. So that means the timeline needs to be defined, and if you delay it, then you increase the cost.
Absolutely. I think that's a bang on example that you just shared, because it is a perfect example of uh, a project management. It's an event. An event has a start date and an end date, and it's a bang on example that you shared. And that this basic things applies in a very large scale, multi level projects as well. So to conclude on this, I mean, what do you think? What is the future of project management, and how do you think our workspaces are going to operate in our daily routine when it comes from a project based point of view?
In my opinion, I believe for in the future, probably the vertical scalability of the same thing might not be a project management because we might have robust system to scale, be agile and scale vertically in our operations. But of course, for horizontal expansion way, we will continue to have projects and also for events, I believe.
Yeah, I think in context of academic life and the field, it's really interesting because now in the past years we are also starting to get these training modules from external people who then teach the new joinees as a PhD or even as a postdoc these basic principles of project management and so on, because I think it really helps structure the timeline that you have. If you're a postdoc, you have like 1 or 2 years, or if you're a PhD, you have like 3 to 4, and then like being able to structure this, having this a bit of theoretical background really helps. So I think that is really good to have nowadays. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think project management does have a future, because every new product being launched, every new startup, just being a dream or a vision for the founder. Everything until the implementing stage is a part of project management. And it is always going to, even the movies that we see on screen is a project, because movies has a start date and end date and has a lot of team, 150 200 people involved in it, including all the spot boys, musicians, everyone involved in it, the editors, even the content creation that we do these days is a part of project. Even if the YouTube channel is ongoing, but every single video which is uploaded on the channel has a editing stage, has a script writing, has a lot of aspects in it, is itself is a part of project. So I think project management is, if I have to conclude, I can say, is a field which is still not very well understood by the people around globally, I would say. uh, People have a very vague understanding of what is project management about, whereas in reality we are managing projects directly or indirectly in our everyday life. And it is still a booming industry, and it's still a big, at a very beginning stage, that people, every construction project again is a project. So everything that we see around, a lot of things are a part of project, and there's so much to learn and there's so much to explore. And I really really hope that a lot of audience watching this can dive deep into these aspects of project management, because there's a lot of things to learn. So that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation, especially if you're someone who enjoy the topic and discussion around project management, and if you are an aspirant of project management. So stay tuned to the channel for many videos related to management, be it case studies, models, methods, case studies, etc., and also for the Weekend Club series, of course. I'll see you next week.